All right, in other news, Russia has conducted fresh strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Ukraine says Russian forces carried out 567 attacks over the last 24 hours.
At least 7 people were injured in a missile strike, while 2 others were hospitalized, and 23 private homes, 12 apartment buildings, and a post office suffered damage.
What happens when more than 70 drones, decoy cruise missiles, and electronic warfare vehicles all converge on one of Russia's most heavily defended cities at dawn? In this video, we'll break down the coordinated Ukrainian assault on St. Petersburg that tested and exposed the vulnerabilities of an air defense system once thought nearly impenetrable. Stay with us because the initial radar confusion was only the beginning, and the way the city's defenses buckled may redefine modern urban warfare. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. What if the most advanced air defense system in Europe was not broken by overwhelming force, but by chaos itself? That was the question hanging in the air as the sun rose and more than 70 Ukrainian drones lifted from secret launch sites hidden along the Baltic approaches. They weren't arranged in neat formations or concentrated on a single direction. Instead, they spread like a tide, moving towards St. Petersburg from so many different bearings that operators in the city's defensive hubs couldn't decide where to look first. On the radar displays, dots began to multiply in irregular patterns, some steady, others flickering in and out. The early hours of that morning set the stage for a different kind of battle, one that measured not the strength of steel.
Ukraine and Russia are exchanging fire on multiple fronts. Bridges are being destroyed, cities are burning, and oil depots are under attack.
Rescue workers say 1 person died and 26 were injured.
At least 7 people were injured in a missile strike, while 2 others were hospitalized, and 23 private homes, 12 apartment buildings, and a post office suffered damage.
But the limits of human reaction time. The defenders suddenly faced dilemmas at every altitude. Low-humming shapes slipped only a few dozen meters above the waterline, hugging the coast so tightly that radar struggled to lock them. Higher overhead, other drones crept in from the east, at altitudes designed to pull surveillance beams upward. Tracking both simultaneously meant making snap choices under pressure, because every engagement drained precious interceptors. If a commander turned toward the low-flying swarms, the arrivals at altitude gained ground unhindered. If they concentrated on the eastern sky, the drones by the coast moved through unseen shadows. Each second stalled meant more real estate lost, and in a system designed for layered coordination, hesitation carried its own danger. This is where the Kh-59 cruise missiles entered the game. They weren't fired to destroy, but to lie. Each one lit up radar frequencies, pulling alert systems into chase mode like false prey. They streaked in boldly, presenting the kind of signature that air defense operators are trained to prioritize. Surface-to-air missile crews responded accordingly, locking them and firing interceptors into the air to stop them. But by spending rounds on what turned out to be diversions, they left gaps wide open for the unmanned swarms behind. The missiles had done their job by simply existing as distractions, tricking one of the most disciplined defenses into misplacing attention. Previous Ukrainian attacks had used 10, maybe 20 drones at most, often aimed at specific assets for sudden blows. Those were disruptive, but manageable. This one was different. It had layers of deception stacked onto each other, stretching the fight across an extended window of time. Instead of a single spurt of incoming targets, they created a rhythm, waves unfolding one after the other, with no obvious rhythm to anticipate.
Biggest Russian drone and missile attack of the war. Ukraine says Moscow fired 550 drones and 11 missiles overnight.
To Russia launching a massive aerial assault against Ukraine, the biggest since the invasion more than 3 years ago.
All right, in other news, Russia has conducted fresh strikes on Ukraine's Zaporizhia region. Ukraine says Russian forces carried out 567 attacks over the last 24 hours.
The aim wasn't just to damage. It was to confuse until the line between real attack and illusion dissolved completely. Inside control rooms, Technicians watched as their consoles overloaded with returns. Some objects appeared multiple times on different vectors, while others disappeared, only to return moments later. Bearing reports contradicted each other. Operators raised their voices, relaying instructions over channels that were suddenly filled with bursts of static interference. The lines broke apart mid-sentence, leaving half-finished orders with no one sure how to interpret them. Electronic warfare had joined the assault, jamming communications until commanders were isolated inside their own outposts. In an environment where seconds meant survival, disconnection was as deadly as any bomb. The frontline weapons, the Panzer autocannons, opened up against what they could see. Their precision radar-guided guns tore through the air, dropping drones and flashes. But the triumph was always partial. For everyone brought down, pairs slipped past. The gunners never knew which of the targets represented real machines and which were ghosts planted by electronic interference. They chased echo after echo, while the actual threats pressed closer. The frustration showed in the volume of fire, with endless tracers lighting up the horizon, none of them halting the larger push. Ukraine had shifted the battlefield away from brute firepower and toward complexity itself. By forcing Russia's air defense into a maze of conflicting signals, they engineered paralysis. Once frozen in that state, no amount of expensive hardware mattered. The structure of the defense was intact, but its decision-making power had been scrambled into hesitation. That paralysis had consequences. While operators scrambled to untangle what was real, the swarm's true payload finally hit its mark. Explosions ripped through fuel depots and supply tanks stationed at the outer edge of the city's infrastructure, fireballs rolling high enough to be seen from miles away. The net that was supposed to seal St. Petersburg had been punched open not by overwhelming numbers alone, but by a strategy designed to overload it at every level. By the time defenders regrouped and realized where the genuine danger lay, the damage on the ground was irreversible. And this was only the beginning, because once the battle for the sky gave way, the focus of the fight shifted to the flames already spreading below. The St. Petersburg strike proved that building thicker shields doesn't guarantee safety. What mattered wasn't firepower, but how quickly networks could recover once overwhelmed. A defense grid designed to intercept predictable waves collapsed when faced with a moving puzzle of drones, decoys, and jamming. If 70 unmanned aircraft and a handful of cruise missiles could unravel that system in under an hour, what does it mean for other cities? Financial hubs, ports, energy centers, many rely on layered defenses, all vulnerable to overload. The battle wasn't only Ukraine versus Russia, it showed the world that complexity itself now decides outcomes.